Good evening, everyone. I'm Kelly Runyon. Primary elections are coming up March 18th, and 3 candidates will face off for the Republican nomination for the 110th District State Representative seat being vacated by incumbent Brad Halbrook. This district includes all or parts of counties in our viewing area, like Coles, Crawford, Cumberland, Clark, Lawrence, and Edgar. Tonight, you'll hear from each of the candidates about the local issues that affect you and your decisions. The candidates are Darrel Cox of Ashmore, Reggie Phillips of Charleston, and Kevin Garner of Gasey. The questions for this forum have been selected from submissions from the local and area journalism community and the Coles County League of Women Voters. Questions were screened for duplication and appropriateness by WEIU. Each candidate will get a chance to answer each question. Responses will then be timed at 2 minutes apiece. Again, I'm Kelly Runyon from WEIU, and I will serve as moderator tonight. We'd also like to welcome Corrine Joyner from the Coles County League of Women Voters, who will aid in forum timing. We'll begin with a 1-minute opening statement, the order of which was determined by drawing straws backstage. And that order is as follows: Mr. Phillips, Mr. Cox, and Mr. Garner. Mr. Phillips gets the first opening statement. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this evening, and we will turn the forum over to Mr. Phillips for your opening statement.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you, WIU and the League of Women Voters, for hosting this debate. I'm Reggie Phillips, and I reside in Charleston, Illinois. I'm originally from Arthur, Illinois. After graduating in 1975 from high school, I went on to Lakeland College. I lived in Mattoon and then graduated from Lakeland College in '73. I went on from there to go to Eastern Illinois University. I graduated there from 1975 with a BS degree in Finance and Production Management. I worked on my grandfather's farm and associated other jobs until getting a job in an Arthur construction company. I was taught work ethics from my grandfather and my dad. He worked at USI in Tuscola at the power plant. I met my wife of 38 years in 1972 while attending Lakeland College. She is from Grayville, Illinois, and grew up on her family farm. We have 4 children and 2 oldest sons, work daily with our family business. I'm in this race because I believe this person should have an unshakable faith and experience, the kind that's successful and time-tested. I started with a hammer, and I've been self-employed for 40 years, and our businesses employ around 400 great Illinois folks. So
Mr. Phillips, I'm sorry, we're on a strict time deadline here, but we do appreciate your introduction. We'll get back to you, but we are now moving on to Mr. Cox. Mr. Cox, your introduction this evening.
Thank you. I would also like to thank WEIU and the League of Women Voters for giving us the opportunity to speak here tonight and share our views. I am Darrel Cox. I'm the current Coles County Sheriff. I've spent 26 years as a deputy sheriff. I was first elected as sheriff in 2006 and re-elected with approximately 65% of the vote in 2010. My term will expire this November. I'm a lifelong resident of the district. I grew up in Charleston, and after graduating from Charleston High School, I graduated from Lakeland College in 1978 and was hired by the Coles County Sheriff's Office. I live on a small farm in rural Ashmore. I'm a conservative, and I believe in small government. I'm a life member of the National Rifle Association. I'm a member of the Illinois Sheriff's Association Legislative Committee. As sheriff, I have experience in writing and managing multi-million-dollar budgets, and I know firsthand that Illinois does not have a funding problem. We have a spending problem. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Cox. We move now to Mr. Garner.
Hi. Again, thanks for having us here tonight. My name is Kevin Garner from Gasey, a little town south of Gasey, actually, Hazeldale. I'm 46 years old. I'm running for this office because I believe in it. I believe in a democracy. I have not been pushed, prodded, or pulled. I've not been put in place by another politician. I'm running on my own admission. This is actually my second run for this office. I ran the first time against Mr. Halbrook, and I came within 3%, but I was outspent 11 times. And so my theory is hard work and spend less, and I'm your neighbor. I can relate to most of you. I've been a success at business and a failure at business. I've been a success at relationships and failure at relationships, But I'm just a guy, and I believe a good representative needs to be a good listener, and I will listen to the people, and I will take their voice to Springfield.
Thank you, Mr. Garner, and I think the people had a good chance to get to know all of you with that brief introduction. Thank you. It's time now for questions from our journalist submissions. Now, each candidate will have a couple of minutes to answer the question, and we begin tonight with Mr. Phillips with our first question, and that is, what do you see as your role or duty to your constituents if elected as the state representative in the 110th district?
Well, first of all, I believe my role is to work to create some sort of a good or liaison, a person that can handle all the problems that come to this district, from phone calls, from issues that all the people have in the district. Then from there, I believe my job is to try to figure out a way to bring jobs to our district and work towards solving some of the issues that we have in our district. I would like to first try to go to Springfield and work on lowering the workers' compensation rates that we have in Illinois, and roll back the tax rates that are coming due in this next year, January of 15, to keep those from going on. So those are two of the things I'd like to see done, and then making sure that we have some sort of person that can handle all the issues, and that's where I think I would be.
Thank you for that response. And we'll ask the same question to Mr. Cox. Again, what do you see as your role or duty if elected to this seat?
I think it's any representative duty to represent the people of the district. Obviously, you have to be in touch with the people out in the district. This district geographically is almost six counties. It's 90 miles from my house to Lawrenceville, but it's an obligation that you take. It's full time. I think you need to be out there in the district, listening to the people and what they have to say, and take those concerns to Springfield. I've been from one end of the district to the other. I know that some of the concerns that I hear are protecting our Second Amendment rights. Although we have concealed carry in Illinois now, we have to remember it wasn't granted to us through the legislature. A federal judge forced it upon the state, and we have to safeguard those. I think that's paramount, that we, not just the Second Amendment, but the Constitution in general, the Illinois Constitution. Obviously, we're broke. We're in a physical mess, and I think it's incumbent upon whoever's in Springfield to work to fix that problem. That's the number one problem in the Illinois government right now, is our spending. And we're not there because we have failed to tax enough. We're there because we spend too much. And I think one of my number one priorities when I get there, and this is what I hear across the district, is that we've got to get our physical house in order. And the first thing we have to do is stop digging the hole. We have to stop spending, and then we have to prioritize where we're going to spend and go from there. And I do believe in cutting corporate tax rates. We have to become business friendly and bring those businesses back to Illinois, which brings people back to Illinois and taxpayers back to Illinois. We can't tax our way out of this. Thank you.
There'll be a lot of budgetary questions this evening, as I'm sure you expect. But before that, we do need to hear from Mr. Garner. Again, if you were elected to this seat, what would your duty be to the constituents?
My duty, if I'm elected, will be to represent the people of the 110th district first and foremost. I would represent the people over a party. I would represent the people over an agenda. These two gentlemen pretty well took everything. Good answers. But yeah, they said it all. You know, the Second Amendment is important to all of us. Taxation rate is crazy high. I was a multi-township tax assessor in Cumberland County for 10 years, and I see firsthand people are taxed to death. Something has to give. I think a lot of the problems with the state of Illinois is stinking thinking. I believe in positive power. Positive thinking. And, our kids are hearing it at the kitchen table. Illinois is a bad place. Illinois is a bad place to live, and it's not a bad place. We've just created a bad environment over the years. We didn't. The folks before us did. And, when the kids grow up and go to high school and graduate, they've heard for the last 10 years that Illinois is not a good place to get a job. Illinois, you can't afford to live. Illinois is not a good place to start a business. So they're moving out of the state. I think Illinois ranks number 1, if I recall, in population moving out of the state. It's hard to bring a business in a state where the people are leaving. So I think it starts at home. I think all of us need to turn it around and work together.
All right, the first question's out of the way, so everybody can take a deep breath now. All right, we're going to move on now. We're going to move on to question number 2, and we start this evening on question number 2 with Mr. Cox, and the question is, the current Illinois governor is calling for a minimum wage hike to at least $10 an hour. Do you support a change in the state's minimum wage? If so, why? Mr. Cox?
I do not support an increase in the minimum wage. We have had wage increases, minimum wage increases in the past. It really did not affect the poverty rate. The poverty rate remained the same. I don't believe that raising the minimum rate will have much of a impact on poverty at all. I think what we need to concentrate on more than raising the minimum wage is making sure that those people that start out in a job career, whether it's in a McDonald's or an entry-level position, that they have the opportunity to move up that ladder. Minimum wage jobs weren't created for you to be able to buy new cars and have a house and raise a family. It was an entry-level job. And we need to concentrate on making sure that our people have the vocation education and college education is available to move up that ladder. And I see it as more of a way of getting started, and we need to concentrate on making sure they have the education, the experience, and whatever is necessary so they can climb that ladder and make more money as opposed to staying at a minimum wage level job. Thank you.
Mr. Garner, again, the minimum wage, the governor's talking about hiking it. Is that something that you support or deny?
No, ma'am, I don't support it. Folks that work for minimum wage are hardworking people. How they survive, I don't know. It's got to be very tough. On the other hand, I certainly wouldn't want to see it decreased. On the other hand, I wouldn't want to see it increased because the rest of us all take a pay cut. If they take $1 or $2 pay raise, we just took a pay cut because the price of fuel and propane and milk and bread and everything goes with it. So I don't think that's the solution because it drives a bigger gap between the rich and the poor, and there's no middle class left. We keep doing this. So no, I would not support a minimum wage increase right now. I think right now we need to just sit back and focus and take care of the problems we have and not create bigger ones.
And the question is now posed to you, Mr. Phillips. Again, the minimum wage increase or stay the same?
I think in our current economy, an increase of minimum wage would be detrimental to us. First of all, we're not competitive with the states around us. And if we raise our minimum wage to $10.65, which is what they're proposing at by the governor, it would create an unfair business for all of the businesses that border Indiana State, Indiana, and Missouri. They're using the federal unemployment rate of 7.25%. So, first of all, it would behoove them to really work on raising the federal unemployment rate so that we have more of a competitive rate across America. And it's been the same for 5 years in a row now. So if they raise the minimum wage to $10.65, those that were making minimum wage are going to want to be paid $2 or $3 more than that. So you're going to create a lot of extra costs for a lot of small businesses right now that are struggling in our state. And this was only meant to be for high school students and entry-level college students. It wasn't meant for raising a family. At $10.65, you still can't raise a family on $10.65. They've missed the point. This isn't the way to raise wages in the state of Illinois. The way to raise wages in Illinois is to control the workers' compensation rate and to lower the tax rates to corporations back down to where it was in 2011. And the personal taxes for people back to the 3.5% rate. Now you'll drive business, and driving business to Illinois, you'll have employees working, and they won't be making $10.65 an hour. We're not a friendly state to corporations because the cost of doing business in Illinois is outrageous. I know that because my business has that. They've added on more new laws in the state of Illinois since Blagojevich and Quinn, and we just can't sustain this. And the businesses are driving way out of our state, and they're moving right to Indiana. So, no, the 1065 is not going to accomplish it. It's like having two restaurants that will stop.
You saw the cue, so we have to move on now to question number 3. And in this question, we start with Mr. Garner on this one. And the question is, the state's temporary income tax is set to expire at the end of the year. Do you support letting the tax expire or reinstating it? If let to expire, how would you propose making up this revenue?
My answer is going to be pretty short. I think anytime you have a negotiation or an agreement, you need to fulfill your obligation. The taxpayers have fulfilled their obligation. If it's time to expire, then it needs to expire. And then we need to figure something else out. And I think the answer isn't necessarily more taxation, it's less spending. Just if you're in a hole, quit digging. So short to the point, but that's my answer.
I'll ask you, Mr. Phillips, again. If the state's temporary income tax increase is set to expire at the end of the year, would you support letting it expire or reinstating it? And if expire, how would you propose making up that lost revenue?
Well, it has to expire, and it was always meant to expire. It was never set. It was always set to be a temporary tax increase. They have now collected something like $19 billion. And through the end of 2014, they will have collected $25.7 billion for that temporary tax increase. The purpose of that was to pay down their bills and pay against the pensions, of which they've only paid a couple of $1 billion for paying down the bills and a few $1 billion for the pensions. Where did the rest of that money go? Went in the general ledger and spent, and fruitishly, not to pay down our bills. So, the problem is there's a potential that in the lame duck session they will probably try to pass that through with both Democratic House and Senate. So that's another issue that has to be addressed soon. So we're probably going to get it because of the way this Democratic set up, but it was never meant to be a permanent tax. And they've misused the tax now. So the alternative is to replace that is the problem with the Medicaid issue that we have. The fraud in the Medicaid issue would be one place to make up a little over $2.5 billion of that money. There's multiple areas. With paying our bills on time, we can save millions of dollars by paying our bills on time. We also borrowed $14 billion to pay towards pensions. We're paying $1.6 billion on that. We have to stop the spending that they have here. It's out of control, and it's not putting it towards where they were supposed to be in to begin with.
Mr. Cox, would you let it expire, or would you support letting it continue? And if so, where do we make up the revenue?
I would let it expire. I was not necessarily against the tax increase if it was going to be used to pay down the debt. They did not. They used that money for other purposes. They did not use it to pay down the debt. We are deeper in debt now than we have ever been. To make up that revenue, I think we need to do a forensic audit. The state of Kansas did a forensic audit. They saved over $1 billion. And by a forensic audit, I mean we need to account for every penny that we spend. In Kansas, they saved $1 billion. We are 4.5 times bigger than the state of Kansas. So there's a potential there for us to save $4 billion. But let's just say we only save $2 billion. That's a start. I said it earlier, we need to stop digging the hole. We need to balance the budget today. That's the first thing we need to do. Not spend, I mean, no one in this studio can spend money that we don't have, and neither should the state. Obviously, if we'd been living by those rules, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. Medicaid fraud is a huge problem in the state of Illinois. Almost 20% of people that receive Medicaid don't live in Illinois and aren't eligible for it. We need to clean that up. That would be billions in savings, and I think that would more than make up the lost revenue from the tax increase. I said it when in my opening statement, we cannot tax our way out of this. Ronald Reagan lowered the marginal tax rates and actually increased the amount of tax revenue. And if Ronald Reagan can do it in the 1980s, Illinois can do it too.
Mr. Cox, you're going to keep talking because we're moving on now to question number 4, and you're first up with question number 4. And that is, Illinois is facing, and one of you mentioned it, an underfunded state employee pension system. Obviously, it's a very deep and complex problem that we have. But what do you plan to propose to solve the pension problem?
Well, I don't know I have the answer myself to solve the pension problem at the school pension problem or the pension problems in Illinois. I do think that, we should stop digging in the hole. The state should take the money that was appropriated for those pensions and keep it in the pension fund. It needs to be fully funded. I think that we have an obligation to pay pensions for those people that have already retired. We shouldn't be changing the game in the middle of the process. Once a person's retired, we should do everything possible to make sure that they get the pension that they paid into. It's not retired folks' problem, state employees, because the state took their pension money and did something else with it. I think we have an obligation to pay those pensions at all costs, if we can. I will go back to where we can save money, and that forensic audit and things of that nature. We have to prioritize things, obviously, and I believe that paying those pensions is important. And now I will say this: for those people that we hire tomorrow, everything should be on the table. Welcome to the real world. When I retire, I'm not going to get paid health care. I'm not going to retire at 26 years of service. I think that we need to look at that, and if we can't afford that in the future for new hirees, but they know that coming into the game, and they can elect to buy into the system or not. So it should be on the table for new employees, but I think we ought to do what we can to make sure that those pensions that are in place, that we safeguard those and live up to our obligation.
Thank you. Mr. Garner, you're up next to talk about the pension question, the underfunded state employee pension system. It's deep, it's complex, it's troublesome. What would you propose to do to solve this pension crisis?
Sure. Again, I'm with Darrell, but I don't think any of us have the answer. This is a problem that's been creating for years and years, decades. When the interest rates were high, there wasn't a pension problem. But the state has misfunded the money. The state has mismanaged it, and they've spent these folks' money on something else. I don't know that it's necessarily a lack of funding, because these employees have paid into that. They've sacrificed their Social Security for that. And as far as them retiring a little early, well, there are reasons negotiated for that. Like police officers or firemen or things. Studies have shown, that after a certain age, they're not as effective. They lose the strength, they lose the endurance and the speed. So I think when they've negotiated these contracts to retire at an earlier age, I think it's absolutely legitimate. They negotiated it. It was agreed upon. The state agreed to it, and we should have paid them. At this point, how to fix that problem, I think it just comes right back to common sense. And I think it comes back to, your word is your bond. And when the state makes an agreement with the employees or the people or the constituents, we need to follow through with it. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't know that it's not going to get fixed quickly. And again, I agree with Darrell. The new folks coming in, it's going to be a different boat you're in. I served in the Navy, and they taught us if there's a hole in the ship, everybody takes the shirt off their back, or else we all go down. And you grab a pillowcase, a backpack, whatever it takes to shove in that hole and stop it. And unfortunately, we're all going to have to sacrifice a little bit at this point.
Mr. Phillips, your thoughts on the pension crisis in the state?
Well, that's a very touchy situation. It's a very touchy topic, and basically most politicians or politicians-to-be want to just give a dance around it in rhetoric. So, because the truth of it is it's a hard answer. And there are solutions to it, but, the one side, which is the recipients, they're not going to want to listen to what's the solutions to it. So nobody really wants to tell the truth of the matter. Now, the investments part of it, they lost $17.2 million based on their investments. And you understand, it's not the politicians that were in control of it. The actual control is by the teachers' retirement system on that. They actually control where the investments are headed in their particular, and there's the largest fund. Benefit increases created a $5.8 billion loss. 06-07 under Blagojevich, they had the pension holiday. And then during the Edgar plan, which is a Republican plan, they had $30.4 billion of underfunding under the pension plan by the Republicans. 42% of that was employer contribution shortfalls in that particular time period. So it all adds up to that $90 billion shortfall. Now, 63% of the state workers retired before age 60. 71% of the TRS members retired before the age 60. They have the COLAs. They have the increased age closer. The solutions are out there, and everybody knows those solutions. You know, you could bring the retirement age closer to the Social Security. And these are all things that have been talked about, and all of them have been rejected by the unions. And the point of the matter is going to take hard choices for everybody, and it's not going to be favorable choices. I am like everybody else. I believe that those that were told 30 years ago that they would be able to retire at 55 for a certain amount of money, you know, we should be obligated to do that. The way to do that is to save the money in these other areas to maybe put it back into the pensions. But from going forward first, we have to fund these pensions. No more holidays.
All right, we have to stop you there and move on to question number 5, and it starts with Mr. Garner. And the question is, a new Illinois law allows 17-year-olds to vote in the primary as long as they will turn 18 by the general election in November. Now, do you think that this was an appropriate law to pass? Are voters at that age, being 17, properly informed to cast ballots?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, I was 17 years old when I joined the Navy. And I feel like if you're old enough to serve your country, then you should be old enough to vote who's going to send you to war. So yeah, I think it's a good idea. I think they're pretty educated in the schools today. I think it's a pretty good topic that the teachers are teaching a lot on. And, you know, they're seeing things with all the technology. And I think they realize now more than ever that, you know, who they elect affects their future directly. So yes, I'm okay with it.
Mr. Phillips, you are speaking to the young voters for this question. Do you believe that at 17 they're well informed and can make appropriate voting decisions?
Well, it's time we get them involved in Illinois politics and national politics. This country is going to be there someday, and right now it's in a mess, and they need to know where it's at. They need to get absolutely informed and start trying to come up with solutions, truthful solutions as to how they could come out of these things. So it's the apathy out there amongst the voters, young and old, is, you know, what can we do? We can't change things. And you know, I read an article just is this in the newspaper, Times Courier this week, is this as good as it gets? Are you kidding me? Is this as good as it gets? It gets better if we get involved. And the more they get involved, the more we get involved, we change things. So we have to build some enthusiasm in the young. This is a great way of getting involved, and I would be absolutely for it.
Mr. Cox, same question.
Absolutely. I think that 17-year-olds should have the right to register so they can vote at the age of 18. I think you can be an uninformed voter at the age of 18, or you can be an uninformed voter at the age of 85. So, and I think it is an opportunity to get young people involved in the political process. You know, I have friends that literally died for the right to vote, and God bless their souls. And we take our freedoms here for granted, and I think the right to vote is one of those that's dear to my heart, and it's what makes this country run. Unfortunately, even the voters over the age of 18 aren't taking advantage of that. We see apathy in the system. We see that only 48% of the people are in a major general election, national-wide, go vote. That's sad. And I think this is an opportunity to get young people involved, get them educated, and allow them to be a part of the process. What happens in Springfield, what happens in Washington, they are directly affected by it, and I think they ought to have a voice in how it affects their lives.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cox. Well, the sixth question is to Mr. Phillips, we start with. And the question is, if elected, you'll be representing a rural area of the state, of course. What is your strategy of representing a rural area, and would it be different if you represented an urban area?
Well, I'm a hard worker. I start early and go late. I plan to be in the district from one end to the other. I plan to be to every business. There's a lot of businesses in our rural districts. I plan to have at least quarterly meetings with those folks. I want to have meet and greets during the entire time if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, because I need to hear from those. I need to be involved with the constituents on what are they seeing happening. How can we start bringing the jobs back to our district? How can we get people involved? What is it we need to do to be ready if a few of the laws happen to be changed? So I would be working as hard as I have been my whole life. I started with just a hammer, and it was just through hard work. So I'll be in the district. I'll be out there. They'll see me. They'll know me. I'll hold meet and greets, and we'll be available. We'll have offices also. We'll probably retain the office that is in Robinson now, which would be centrally located in the southern area. And instead of Charleston, I probably would locate the Coles County office in Mattoon. And we would have somebody in those offices, phone numbers available for constituent situations like getting concealed carry, the time it took for getting the turnaround for their FOID cards was an issue. And Brad Holbrook's office did a wonderful job with that. And Nicole, that works in his office, they sing praises about her up and down. I had problems with the Illinois EPA, not getting my EPA permits on time to do the construction work we needed. I made phone calls to Nicole. She was able to make phone calls, and within 24 to 48 hours, she had it taken care of. She's going to stay with me in that office if I'm elected. So that's what we have to do. We have to be readily available 24 hours. They'll have my personal cell phone if they need me. I'm a hands-on person. I don't pass it off to anybody else, and I'll take it to state to do whatever I need for them.
All right, we're moving on to Mr. Cox. How would you represent the rural area of the district?
I think first you have to be accessible. Geographically, it's a large area, and we do, as a legislator, it's almost imperative that you have at least 2 offices in the district. And I too would have an office in the Robinson area, and obviously Coles County holds almost 50% of the population, so it's imperative that you have an office in Coles County, located centrally in the district. I have, as sheriff, my phone number is still in the phone book. I still prescribe by that. If I were elected as a state representative, I would want to be accessible to the general public, and I would obviously leave my phone in the phone book. So if someone wanted to pick up the phone, talk to their representative, I would be there to answer those phone calls. I think it's imperative that we stay in touch with the members that we represent, the voters, the citizens, and the only way to do that is get out there and travel the back roads of the rural areas and talk to the people and find out what their concerns are. And it's a two-way street. We need to be telling them what we're doing in Springfield as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cox. Mr. Garner, what is your strategy for representing the rural area?
Probably number one, a set of tires. I've been all over the district as well. I've walked 33 towns door to door. I've driven every major highway, stopped door to door. I've been in touch with the voters. I've been to most of their events. I would talk to the experts. You know, if there's a bill coming up on farming, I would talk to the farmer. He's the expert. If it's an education bill, I would talk to the experts, which are the teachers, the parents, the superintendents, the principals. You know, you're the experts. You know, we're hired to represent you and take your voice. You know, as far as the rural, one thing comes to my mind, school buses. You know, I just spoke to a superintendent yesterday, and if you really want to see some frustration on someone's face, talk to a superintendent in our district or in our state, because they're frustrated. She had lost, in Martinsville, they've lost over $400,000 in the last 2 years in funding, which means they had to cut down on school buses. Well, not to mention teacher salaries, et cetera, which, you know, every time one person loses a job, we all lose, because there goes money back into our local businesses, et cetera. But we are a rural community, and I think we need to think about that. I drove a school bus for 2 different districts, and I think we need to think about rural concerns. Our concerns aren't the same as they are in the urban areas. And things that may seem trivial to them are very important to us. And yeah.
All right, well, you're going to keep talking again because we're going to start our 7th question, and you're first. And the 7th question is this. Current Illinois lawmakers are considering amending the state's new concealed carry legislation. Some of the proposals would make it easier to get a permit, and others would expand the list of locations where people would be allowed to carry weapons. Now, do you support legislation as it is, or do you believe other changes need to be made?
Look, the Second Amendment was put there to protect the people, the citizens, and to protect our nation. It's no different than the First Amendment, which you understand is there to protect the citizens. I absolutely think something needs change. I'm a gun owner. I own shotguns, rifles, handguns, a couple collectibles. I like to shoot. I enjoy hunting, and I've been through 16 hours of the concealed carry course here in Charleston with Bill Culp. I didn't have to take 16 hours because as an honorable discharge in the military, I was not required to do that. But I took the full 16 hours because I wanted to learn. And what I learned scares me. As a gun owner, I feel I lost rights if I get that concealed carry permit. I don't know of any other constitutional right as Americans that we have to pay a $500 fee. And that's the tip of it. Then fines and fines and fees on top of that. I had seen where there was just a case where a fella had walked into a place, as you're describing, where it said no guns on the door, and he had his concealed weapon, and someone was robbing the place, and he shot the fella, saved the cashier's life. Now he has felony, for walking in with that. So I've never had a felony in my life, and I think that it's opening the door to do a lot of harm the way it is. I feel like the lawmakers, we fought in this state to get concealed carry. We should have went the distance. I feel like they threw the towel in a little bit early. I feel like we should have finished the fight.
Mr. Phillips, where do you stand on concealed carry legislation? As is, changes need to be made.
Well, I would probably agree with Kevin. I am pro, the rights that we have to carry weapons for concealed carry. As Republicans, I think most of us as Republicans are going to feel that way. They were working on some new legislation now that came out. We got a call on it that they were also trying to on not just weapons but also on ammunition too. They're just carrying it as far as they can and driving it out of our hands. But we as Republicans and as we'll stand in the line and stand in the gap. I also am, like Kevin, a gun owner, and in Arthur we used to go out and shoot pheasant, and now you don't shoot too many pheasants anymore, but that's one of our rights we have as Americans, and they shouldn't have the right to adjust it or take it away from us. And most people had their concealed carry from Florida, and now it should be opened up to Illinoisans, and we should have that right, and I'd be for it 100% and push for it.
Mr. Cox, I'll ask you the same question. Concealed carry. Changes need to be made. Keep the legislation as is.
I'm a life member of the National Rifle Association. I'm a firearms trainer. I've been a law enforcement firearms trainer for over 30 years. This is an issue that I feel I'm well versed in. The Second Amendment, we don't get our rights of self-protection from our government. I believe the right of self-protection, whether you decide to use a firearm or another defensive weapon, it comes from God. And I think you have the right to defend yourself, whether you're in your home. You have the right to defend yourself while you're walking down the street. And you should have the right to defend yourself in a business. Now, obviously, if a business says, I don't want my customers to carry a firearm, then those customers have the opportunity not to do business with that facility. I don't agree with that. To me, when you put a sign on there that says no guns allowed, you're saying, you know what, your Second Amendment, we're going to violate your constitutional right of self-protection, your God-given right to self-protection, so you can't protect yourself when you come in here. I obviously don't agree with that. I think that the laws do need to change. We have to remember that our legislature did not pass concealed carry. We were the last state in the United States to get killed concealed carry. It was forced upon us by a federal judge. So we have to be ever vigilant. We have to protect those constitutional rights, and I think they should be expanded. I don't agree with the cost involved in the right of self-protection, and if I were elected, I would try everything I can to drive those costs down. Poor people should have the right of self-protection. It shouldn't be just for the people that have money in their pocket and can take the class and pay for the fingerprints and get the training, and it should be for anyone that wants to protect themselves should have that right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cox. Well, we have come to the point in this forum where we're going to start what's called a lightning round of questions and answers. I will ask the questions, and I would only ask that you limit your answers to 30 seconds. Now, again, that's why we call it lightning, so you'll have a quick answer to a series of questions.
I feel like I'm on Jeopardy.
You may be on Jeopardy, that's right. Okay, so our first question this evening will go to Mr. Phillips. And Illinois education, both in state universities and public schools, is seeing a budget shortfall. And what action would you take to make sure our public schools and universities receive the funding that they need to adequately educate Illinois' children?
Well, that's a tough question. You know, Eastern Illinois University is going to see a $7 million shortfall. You know, it's going to be difficult when, you know, you've got 63% of the current budget is taken up in Illinois pensions and education now, and in 2017 it's going to be 70% of the Illinois budget. We need revenue. We have to generate revenue through businesses. It's the quickest way. So the legislature is going to have to pass some quick legislative laws on workers' compensation in order to see businesses drive and to get increased money into and I would absolutely vote for the money to be going into the education.
And we have to quickly end it there. That's why we call it the lightning round. Okay. Mr. Cox, same question to you.
Repeat the question again, please.
I will surely repeat the question. Illinois education, both in state universities and public schools, are seeing a budget shortfall all across the board. What action would you take to make sure that public schools and universities receive adequate funding to adequately educate Illinois' children?
Education took a hit, a reduction, and the formula that they use was created in 1920. I think it's antiquated. We need to change the law. When they cut the education funding by 11%, you would think they would say, okay, we have X number of students, we're going to cut the equal amount for all the students. They didn't do that. Downstate of Illinois is getting the short end of the stick. And as an example, Chicago has 18% of the students. Oh,
I have
sorry.
to cut you off.
Okay.
30 seconds goes by quickly, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Mr. Garner, the same question to you. Educational funding, it's a problem.
It's a big problem. I believe it's $6,119 per student is the foundation, which is what the state has said is the minimum that a student should have. In Martinsville, they get $4,200 per student. It would take $143 million just to bring that back up. So I'm not sure exactly how to fix that, but I've got a crazy idea that we up our sales tax a couple percent and do completely away with real estate tax. I think it's worked in other places. I think it would work here, and I got the stop sign.
But here's the good news. We're going to up the time a little bit. Okay. So now the answers will go to 1 minute. 30 seconds just goes by too fast. So lightning round, 1 minute. Here's your next question. Would you support Speaker Madigan's plan to cut the corporate income tax rate? Mr. Phillips, 1 minute to respond.
Absolutely, cut the corporate and the personal tax rate. I'd like to see both of those cut. They're supposed to sunset. He's not giving us anything. It's what was supposed to happen. But absolutely, the corporate rate could you imagine what that's going to do? It's going to start to signal to tell businesses that Illinois has an atmosphere now it's friendly to businesses. And that's important. But coupled with that, it's going to take the dropping the workers' compensation rates back to what Indiana has next door. If we can do that, right here in Illinois, right here in our district, we could probably create 1,000 or 1,500 jobs overnight just with those two things, the corporate tax rate and the workers' compensation. We have to drive that home to these current legislators, which one of us gets up in there. That has to be one of our premium things that we do. Then we'll drive jobs, which will drive income to the education.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cox, would you support Speaker Madigan's plan to cut the corporate income tax rate?
Well, there's very few things that I would support Speaker Madigan on, but this is an exception. I believe we do need to drive down corporate tax rates. We need to become business friendly. We are not. We have the 47th highest, we're number 3rd in the nation, the highest corporate tax rate in the United States. We're not competitive with our surrounding states, and obviously that's why we're losing jobs to Indiana, Missouri, Wisconsin, Kentucky. By bringing a atmosphere that's business friendly, what I said in my opening statement will bring businesses back to Illinois, we'll bring workers back to Illinois, and workers pay taxes. We can't tax our way out of this. We have to become business friendly, and lowering that corporate tax rate is a start.
Mr. Garner.
Yeah, I agree with Reggie and Darrell both. Yeah, it's imperative that we do that. Not so much for bringing more business in, but keeping the business we have. Imagine a place like Marathon if they just decided to go 20 miles east. You know, what that would do to our entire district and state. Yes, it's a short answer, but we all agree on that. You know, it's absolutely necessary that we do that.
Next question. What would your communication style be like with your constituents if you were elected? Mr. Phillips.
How come I get to go first every time?
That's the way the straws were drawn.
Wow, man. Okay. Say that again now. What did you say?
Okay, I sure will.
Yeah.
What would your communication style be like with your constituents? Would you hold town meetings, town halls, open office hours?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I said that previously.
Number in the phone book.
Yeah, well, you'd have my mobile number. You know, I've had the mobile number for many, many years. I've been passing it out up and down the district now so that people can get a hold of me. I'm readily available. I get up, you know, at 4:30 and I don't go to bed until about 9:30. And I'm available all the way through there. It's pretty close, isn't it? You know, and I'm available in between all that time. So I'm out and about everywhere and people know me, so I will be available as much as I need to be. I'll be on the job, whatever the emergencies or situations need for states, for each city, things that need taken care of, and I'll be there. You know, one of the things I like to see is we need to have each of our major cities in our district and be ready for when the businesses do start coming back to our state, and they're going to come back to us because we're going to fight these guys. We have to have lands available, sewer available, and water available. We have to make sure each one of these cities have in large sewers and large waters to make sure that we can have these businesses ready.
Mr. Cox, your communication style with your constituents.
Obviously, being able to talk on the phone, I think maybe in social media, we can communicate with our constituents by Facebook. As much as I abhor some of these Twitter and things like that, I'm just not up to date on that. But yeah, I think that we could use Facebook. I believe that we should have those offices in the district. We should be out in the district, traveling up and down the rural areas and talking to the people that we represent. Again, that's a two-way street. I think that we also need to be telling them what's going on in Springfield. We need to send out letters or cards or some way to communicate and tell them what we are doing in Springfield and what are their concerns. And again, that communication needs to be two ways, and telephone, letters, U.S. mail, Twitter, Facebook, well, whatever it takes.
Mr. Garner, I'll ask you the same question. Your communication style.
Sure.
What would you do to rally the voters if elected?
Sure. Well, again, I think any of the three of us are going to be highly accessible. I think any of the three of us would reach out. I believe one thing that would make me different than the others is, like let's say when the river floods again down in Palestine, I'm not going to show up and call the news crew and give a 5-minute talk and go home. I'm not even going to call the news crew. I'm going to be the guy that goes down there and starts sandbagging. That's me. I got calloused hands. I'm going to be the guy that's right there beside my constituents, feeling their pain and helping them solve their problems. So, again, we're all going to have offices centrally located, Facebook, the whole deal. But my thing is, I'm approachable. I don't think anyone in the district, regardless of your income or your politics or whatever, would be hesitant to approach me. I'm approachable, and I will listen, because I believe that's what a representative is elected to do, is to listen.
We have come to the last question in our lightning round, and again, we'll start with Mr. Phillips. What would you do to help further economic development in the area?
Well, we've been touching on it briefly, with trying to take legislation to Springfield to change the workers' compensation rate. I'm the only candidate that is actually for term limits. And I think pushing term limits is going to be helpful too. Bringing businesses back to the district, like I said, we have to be ready when that starts to come. But the biggest thing we're going to do driving is if we can lower workers' compensation rates, we're going to increase businesses, because I know of at least 4 or 5 businesses now. One that would grow by 17 jobs in a plastic factory, another one that would grow 4 on a grain elevator factory. I know multiple jobs. We probably could have retained. We lost in Robinson that job, the poultry job, for 350 because of workers' compensation rates. They went across to Indiana and saved $1 million. So this would be part of what we would be ready to bring these things back to our district.
Mr. Cox, what would you do to help further economic development in the district?
I think all 3 of us have talked about being more competitive to bring businesses back to Illinois. We have the potential. Illinois has more interstate highways than any surrounding state. We have some of the most fertile farmland in the world. Obviously, this is a rural community, and farmers depend upon ways to get their grains and their products to market. We have 2 major waterways to move our goods and services on. So Illinois has the potential to be a powerhouse in the Midwest, if not all across the United States. But we need to tap that potential. We need to bring those businesses back by being business friendly. But lowering the corporate tax rate is only part of it. I think that we've got to look at reducing the cost of doing business in Illinois by driving down fees, fines. And I have a friend of mine that runs a stone quarry, and he talks about he quarries 30 acres of rock a year, and he has to buy a permit to scrape the dirt off, a permit to take the rock out, a permit to put the dirt back. I mean, we need to streamline that and make it more competitive.
Mr. Garner, I'll pose the same question to you.
Well, again, I agree with these guys. I work for a small company, LD Mechanical, and every time we put in a furnace, which they've been doing for 36 years, every time we put in a furnace now or a water heater, there's a $25 fee, tax, permit, however you phrase that, which hurts our cost of doing business. There's about 22 employees out there. This fee alone could be the difference of staying in business or out of business, in a job, out of a job. We, of course, we push that onto the customer, which now it's a burden upon you. And it's just the over-government regulation. I had a small business. I had 18 employees, and you're almost expected to know, to be an EPA agent, to be an accountant, it's just incredibly crazy what they've done to small businesses in this state. And I own an auction service, which is debt-free, and same there, all the continuing education and things. Sorry.
All right. Well, it's time now in the forum to come to the candidates each making a 1-minute closing statement, the order of which was determined by a drawing before the forum started this evening. And Mr. Garner will make his final statement. So, Mr. Garner, you'll have 1 minute to make your final statement this evening.
Well, my hat's off to these other 2 gentlemen as well. This hasn't been an easy road for any of us. It's tough. This isn't an easy thing. I would appreciate your vote. It really just comes down to, I don't think any of us have all the answers. I've never claimed to have all the answers, but I'll listen. I will listen to you. All 3 of us shook hands, looked one another in the eye, said we'd keep a clean race. I've done that. There's a lot of talk about keeping things, business here, keeping our business here local. As far as I know, I'm the only candidate that has bought in every single one of my signs and literature within the district. I've kept it local. I'm your neighbor, so I've been out there. That's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garner. And for a closing statement this evening, we move to Mr. Phillips.
Well, I'm a successful Illinois businessman with skin in this state, 9 grandchildren's future based on decisions made now. I'm the only candidate for term limits. Illinois is one of 11 states that currently doesn't have term limits. I know how to work hard. When I started a business, I was there, and I was the last to leave. I never asked anyone to do anything I wouldn't or had not done. I pledge to work relentlessly toward job creation. I'm for sunsetting the 2011 tax hikes. Without question, we have to cut workers' compensation rates to be competitive in our border states. We have to roll back the needless economic restrictive policy of the Blagojevich and Quinn years. Making Illinois easier for businesses to grow and operate will pay huge dividends. The solution is simple. Lower taxes, reduce workers' compensation rates immediately to comparable rates of Indiana, and reduce the regulations. We stand as one of the worst climates in America. So that's my ending.
All right, thank you, Mr. Phillips. And we'll end with Mr. Cox this evening for 1-minute closing.
Well, again, I would like to thank WEIU and the League of Women Voters for inviting us here and giving the viewers the opportunity to listen to what we have to say so they can make an informed choice on March 18th. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I'm not going to talk about any more about corporate taxes. But we are all conservative. This is a conservative district. And if I'm elected as a representative in this district, I want to go to take my expertise from the sheriff's office, working with those government budgets, and I want to take that to Springfield and do what I can to bring the state back into where we're physically responsible and we have a vibrant economy and we start growing again. And I think that's imperative. I think that's the number one thing on our radar is to get Illinois back to work again because we have the potential. And I want to thank you, and obviously I'm going to look at the camera, and I want you to go vote on March 18th. I don't care who you vote for, but exercise your right to vote, and I would sure appreciate your support and vote on March 18th. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of WEIU TV, thank you, all three of you, for joining us this evening, for giving up your time and coming to speak with us and being very forthcoming with your answers and your honesty to the voters this evening. And that wraps up our 110th District State Representative Candidate Forum. We would like to thank our candidates again, Darrel Cox, Reggie Phillips, and Kevin Garner. We also want to thank the Coles County League of Women Voters and all of our journalism community partners that submitted questions tonight. For our viewers, this candidate forum will be available soon on YouTube, on our YouTube page at youtube.com/WEIUTV. Comments and questions about the candidate forum can be directed to our email at weiu@weiu.net. For WEIU, I'm Kelly Runyon. Thank you for watching and have a good night.